Here we go. What's going on, guys? How the hell are you? How the hell are you? All right, we got a bit of a long stream tonight, guys. We are going to go over the congressional hearing that happened today covering digital assets, guys. It's going to be a good time. We watched some clips earlier tonight. Brad Garlinghouse testified. Elizabeth Warren is up to her old debauchery and so much more. Quick shout out to Ducks in My Pond. Keep getting eaten. Thank you so much, my friend, for the super chat. The support is always appreciated. You want to know something funny, though? If you can hear the music playing in the background, you know what it's called? It's called Feeding My Ducks. No lie. Very, very funny. Very, very funny. So, yes, thank you so much, as always, my friend, for always being there, always having my back, always supporting the channel, man. Greatly, greatly appreciated. All right, we're going to get into the chat real quick, and then we're going to jump right into the congressional hearing. What a phenomenal close for Bitcoin today, guys. Look at that. We got all the way up and just barely squeaked out a new all-time high. Little over $112,000. You love to see that. Our daily close right around a little over 111,000, almost 300. Very nice. What was important here, guys, and I pointed this out for the last few days, is we wanted to break above this white line right here because this was the high, right? So we wanted to put in a higher high than this so that we could officially break the downtrend, right? Because as you can see, higher, lower high, or high, lower high, lower high. We needed to break that, and we did, right? So things look fantastic. We'll see what happens. We could be in, if this keeps up, we could be in for a higher weekly close than last week, which would be yet another back-to-back weeks of the highest weekly closes in Bitcoin's history. So stay tuned for that. Let's get into the chat a little bit, see what's going on out there. Liquidity, Rob, we need a little less talking and more just you staring at the screen. But on a serious note, look at how fast the doubters ate their words, right? Right? Yo, Mars, what's going on, man? Quentin, good to see you. Daryl, they hate us because they ain't us. Easy. Sorry about your ducks, man. That's good. Well played. Well played. Twitch, what's our next move, Big Daddy? Ari, we had a great talk. I look forward to talking to you this weekend. Easy. When dip. Guys, as always, make sure that you're hitting the like and subscribe to the channel. Helps the channel grow. It doesn't cost you a single thing. Go Times in the house. Hope you're feeling better, my friend. Hope you're feeling fantastic. Spuds is here. EZ says, play loud music, walk on the treadmill, stare at the camera. Let's squash all the haters at one time. There you go. There you go. Loss. I'm digging the intro music. Feels like I'm on hold for T-Mobile. There you go. There you go. Lawrence, looking pretty good. There you go, brother. Bruno's in the house. Eating dinner and waiting for Rob's show to begin. There you go. OG, brother, please talk about Nadix. God bless you. I will talk about Nadix, my friend. Don't worry about that. I love Nadix. We'll talk about, as soon as we have an update on Nadix, we will bring it to the channel. Go time. Here we go. Romeo, good evening all. Zebek looking great. Yeah, Zebek up almost 30% again. Even higher than earlier. Leo, what's going on? Lawrence, Rob, you're 30 seconds early. I like to keep you on your toes, man. I like to keep you on your toes. Thank you for all you do. Truly blessed. No problem, AK. Jared, watching these hearings is always fun with the community. Exactly. All right, guys. I am going to skip ahead because we're going to get started on the congressional hearing. I can't spend 45 minutes in the chat tonight. I will get to super chats, though, but this is about a 2-hour video, or it's 2-hour congressional hearing. So let's get this party started, shall we? Okay, let's go. I will be here with you guys for the majority of it as well. Let's go. I'll turn the music off while we're waiting as well. There we go. All right, now I'll just skip ahead a little bit. Usually.
Genius is more than just a legislative win.
Let's go.
It's a testament to what's possible when Congress works together and puts principles before partisan politics. We can deliver actual results for the American people. From day one, I've promised under my leadership here at the Banking Committee that we would return to what we call regular order and deliver real results for the American people. With the Genius Act, we did just that. And now we have an opportunity and a chance to build on that success. Today's hearing is the first for full committee hearing on digital assets. This is a crucial step toward developing a comprehensive framework that gives innovators the clarity they need and gives investors the protections they deserve. Because make no mistake, blockchain technology and digital assets are not going away. They are here to stay. The question we should ask ourselves is whether the United States will lead in shaping the future of digital finance, or whether we'll let other countries like Singapore and the UAE set the standards while American jobs and innovation leaves our shores. Unfortunately, the Biden administration failed to meet the moment. Instead of clear rules, we saw an enforcement-first approach that punished innovation and created a legal minefield for entrepreneurs. However, the Trump administration understands the importance of innovation, opportunity, and keeping American talent on American soil. It's time to get back to that pro-growth, pro-America first mindset. Here's the reality. The market, not Washington, should decide what works. Our job is to set clear, light touch guardrails to protect investors, stop fraud, and allow responsible innovation to flourish. But instead, regulators under the Biden administration have sent mixed messages, forcing companies to spend millions and millions of dollars just to guess at what's legal. In fact, we've seen agencies like the SEC and the CFTC contradict each other while the American people are left just to guess and, frankly, left behind. That confusion has consequences. Innovation is leaving, jobs are leaving, and the global competitors are filling that vacuum. That's why the Senate Banking Committee Republicans have put forward clear principles for market structure legislation, principles that recognize the need to clarify and clearly define what is a commodity, what is a security, and how digital assets can trade and be custodied in a way that fosters innovation while protecting investors. We don't need more roadblocks. We need rules that actually work. That means legislation that will, number one, clearly define which tokens are securities. Two, supports modern trading infrastructure. Three, ensures appropriate illicit finance protections are in place. And four, protects investors while fostering innovation. And let's set the record straight. Crypto isn't lawless. It's traceable. In fact, crypto companies are helping law enforcement track illicit activity with greater precision than traditional finance allows. The data shows that more illegal activity still happens with cash than with crypto. Today, we'll hear from a strong panel about what's working, what's broken, and what reforms are needed. This is not about scoring political points. It's about protecting investors, rewarding innovation, and ensuring that the next generation of financial technology is made in America. Let's seize this opportunity together and deliver clarity, consistency, and leadership the American people deserve. Thank you to our witnesses for participating in today's hearing. Such a very important hearing. I look forward to your discussion. Ranking Member Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start with an apology. I'm going to be bouncing in and out. This is also the markup of the National Defense
How about you just bounce out and don't come back?
We are in live rewriting of the bill, and so I'm going to have to spend a lot of time over there. And I appreciate the chairman's and the rest of the committee's indulgence here. You know, I want to thank you for having this hearing today. I have been calling for stronger rules and enforcement in the crypto market for many years now. The crypto market has grown 15-fold in just the last 5 years. It's now at about $3 trillion, at least in 2024, where we've got the data. While growth in the market may unlock new opportunities for innovation, risks to investors, our financial system, and our national security have also increased at the same time. Consider some recent data. According to the FBI, Americans lost more than $9 billion to cryptocurrency fraud last year. And it's the trend lines that are particularly concerning. It's a 66% increase from the year before. According to Chainalysis, North Korean hackers stole a record $1.3 billion from crypto platforms in 2024 and then turned around and topped it in just a single heist with a $1.5 billion heist earlier this year. According to TRM Labs, quote, terrorist organizations demonstrated increased sophistication in their use of cryptocurrency, turning to unhosted wallets, mixers, and privacy coins like Monero. We need a crypto regulatory framework that reduces these risks, but I am concerned that what my Republican colleagues are aiming for is another industry handout that gives the crypto lobby exactly its wish list, the blessing of our government's approval, combined with crypto rules that are weaker than the rules that every other financial actor must follow. The crypto industry may be calling the shots for Republicans, but nobody wants weak crypto rules more than the President of the United States. A majority of President Trump's wealth, as much as $7 billion worth, is now based in crypto, from issuing his own stable coin to issuing his own meme coin to owning a Bitcoin mining company and to controlling a huge portfolio of crypto investments. Again, according to Chainalysis, the president and his associates pocketed more than $320 million in fees alone from the Trump meme coin, while the majority of retail investors who bought that same token actually lost money. Now, if we're going to provide rules of the road for crypto, we need to shut down the super highway for presidential corruption at the same time. We need crypto legislation that will strengthen our financial system, not make it worse. Here are principles that I think should guide our work. First, new crypto rules shouldn't open a back door to destroy the securities laws that have served as the bedrock of our capital markets for nearly 100 years. I'm particularly worried here because some recent proposals, including the Clarity Act that the House is voting on this week or next week, include language that would allow non-crypto companies to tokenize their assets in order to evade SEC regulations. Think for just a minute about what that means. Under the House bill, a publicly traded company like Meta or Tesla could simply decide to put its stock on the blockchain and poof, it would escape all SEC regulation. That is a serious problem for our country. Second, crypto investors should have the same protection from getting scammed or getting cheated as investors in any other asset. Doesn't have to be bigger, but it should be the same. For example, there is no reason that the rules prohibiting stock exchanges from simultaneously serving as brokers and giving preferential treatment to their own trades over their customers. We have rules against that elsewhere. Those same rules should apply to the crypto market too. Third, ensure that turmoil in the crypto market doesn't infect our traditional financial system. And that means making sure that taxpayers are not on the hook for backstopping risky crypto bets, and that crypto exchanges, crypto dealers, and other intermediaries face strong capital liquidity and risk management safeguards so they can meet their obligations to consumers and counterparties, even in times of market stress. Fourth, counter the threat of illicit finance with common sense rules to fight crime and protect our national security. Crypto service providers that act as financial institutions must be required to implement anti-money laundering programs. Republicans refused to strengthen AML rules and close sanctions loopholes in the Genius Act, and their claim was that they would deal with this in the crypto market structure bill. Well, this is it. No more kicking the can down the road. Now is the time to solve that problem. And finally, if Congress is going to ratify a sweeping crypto regulatory regime, it is critical to shut down the president's crypto corruption. This means prohibiting public officials, including the President of the United States, prohibiting public officials from issuing, sponsoring, or profiting from crypto tokens. I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues to get this done the right way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Senator Warren. We'll now move to witness testimony. Today we have 6 witnesses before us. Our first witness is the Honorable Summer Mersinger, CEO of Blockchain Association. Ms. Messenger, you now have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Summer Mersinger, and I'm the CEO of Blockchain Association. We're the leading collective voice of the digital asset industry in the United States, representing more than 130 of the most innovative job creators and stakeholders in the blockchain ecosystem. Our members, many of whom are startups and small businesses, are building the next generation of the internet and a new wave of finance here in the United States. From software developers and infrastructure providers to investment firms and trading platforms, we are proud to advocate for the responsible growth of this transformative technology. I'm here today to deliver a unified message from our industry. The United States urgently needs clear, comprehensive, and carefully designed rules for digital assets. Without thoughtfully crafted rules for the road, we risk stifling innovation, leaving American consumers without proper safeguards and protections, and ceding leadership in a sector that will define the future of global finance and technology. Regulating the industry with existing laws has created ambiguity, stifling American innovation, and driving entrepreneurs to jurisdictions with clearer legal frameworks. While jurisdictions like the EU, the UK, Japan, and Singapore are implementing bespoke digital asset frameworks, the United States is falling behind. It's not a matter of whether to regulate, it's how. We need bipartisan legislation that provides clarity, encourages responsible innovation, and reinforces America's role as a global leader in financial innovation. To guide that effort, Blockchain Association has put forward 12 principles that we believe should form the foundation of any durable market structure legislation. Let me highlight a few key themes of our principles, many of which are similar to and align with the Senate Banking Committee Crypto Market Structure Principles released recently by Chairman Scott, Senators Lummis, Tillis, and Hagerty. First, we need a functional and modern framework tailored to the realities of the blockchain ecosystem. This space includes not just traditional financial intermediaries, but also software developers, validators, and other participants who don't fit neatly into 20th century regulatory categories. Second, we must recognize that digital assets are not inherently securities. Much of the current confusion stems from attempting to apply the 1946 Howey test to this technology. Code is not a security. Third, there must be a clear, workable path for platforms to register and operate. Right now, no such path exists. Fourth, strong consumer protections are essential. Our industry fully supports consumer safeguards such as secure custody of customer funds, detailed disclosures, bans on market manipulation, and robust oversight. These are not regulatory burdens. They are the foundation of trust and resilience. Finally, we must view establishing a federal regulatory framework as a national priority. Digital assets and blockchain technology are revolutionizing financial services, supply chains, and digital identity. The country that leads on this policy will set global norms and unlock enormous economic and strategic benefits. The United States should be that leader. And this is our moment to lead. Blockchain Association and its members are not asking for a world without rules. We're asking for clear rules, rules that protect consumers, support innovation, and ensure that the next generation of the internet is built on American values. We urge this committee to seize this historic opportunity and pass meaningful bipartisan market structure legislation this year. We stand ready to be a resource in this endeavor. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mersinger. We will now turn to Jonathan Levin, CEO of Chain Analysis.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be back here to testify. I'm Jonathan Levin, co-founder and CEO of Chain Analysis, the blockchain data company. We maintain the largest database of blockchain intelligence, which powers prevention, investigation, and disruption of illicit activity on the blockchain. We serve over 1,500 clients worldwide, including the largest financial institutions, fintechs, and decentralized applications. We also support over 350 public sector agencies with tools, data, and services to fight illicit activity. Over the last 10 years of Chain Analysis, we have partnered with law enforcement and industry to disrupt some of the largest threats to our national security and public safety. We have proudly helped the US government seize over $12.4 billion of criminal proceeds. These cases have included taking down the largest online drug marketplaces, seizing funds from Hezbollah and Hamas, dismantling the largest child abuse material websites, and tackling the latest pig butchering campaigns. The power of our technology, combined with the authorities of law enforcement and the industry partnership, have proven to be a more effective disruptor of illicit activity than anything seen before in traditional finance. Our mission at Chainalysis is to build trust in blockchains. All forms of value will be transferred using this technology. We are here to prevent abuse and pave the way for all people, businesses, and governments to leverage its potential. The United States can be the major beneficiary if we get the policy framework right and allow regulators to adapt and change with the pace of the technology. I have 3 policy insights that I want to share today with the committee. First, the blockchain introduces a fundamentally new model for financial oversight. We often hear the phrase in these rooms, same activity, same risk, same regulatory outcome. But the unprecedented visibility offered by the public blockchain has to be factored into the assessment of both activity and risk. With the right tools, the public ledger becomes a powerful resource for market participants, regulators, and law enforcement to protect financial integrity. The consideration of different types of activity and risks should first use all of the available information about how these mechanisms work and the relative transparency and residual risk that are associated with these mechanisms. In contrast to traditional financial systems, the ongoing monitoring, oversight, and supervision of the system must be built first on publicly available information. Second, we need to equip government agencies to fully leverage this new paradigm. Getting the right regulations in place will require building capacity of different agencies and industry bodies to tackle the different types of risks, particularly as it relates to illicit finance and payments. It requires the government to understand the operational risks involved in the deployment of smart contracts and decentralized infrastructure and the accompanying mitigations. It requires the government to leverage the transparency and available real-time information for effective supervision. And we need to be designing compliance regimes so that all institutions can engage with decentralized technologies. Government agencies with the right mandates and a focus on public-private partnerships will lead to the type of market infrastructure that all market participants are searching for. Third and finally, the blockchain actually enhances our ability to act quickly against illicit actors. As stated, following the money on the blockchain is actually easier than in traditional finance. But furthermore, issuers of tokenized assets can actually take actions to easily freeze and seize assets. I'll give you an example. In a recent pig butchering case, crypto exchange OKX and stablecoin issuer Tether froze and then seized $225 million of criminal proceeds in collaboration with US Secret Service. The traceability and programmability of these assets is a key benefit in addressing illicit activity. At Chainalysis, we are proud to support the US government in our ability to keep the digital asset ecosystem safe, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Dan Robinson, General Partner at Paradigm.
Chair Scott, Ranking Member Warren, Subcommittee Chair Lummis, Subcommittee Ranking Member Gallego, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify today on the importance of crypto market structure legislation and how to safely and equitably grow the crypto industry in America. My name is Dan Robinson, and I serve as a general partner at Paradigm, which is a research-driven investment firm focused on crypto. My research work has focused on helping portfolio companies solve technical problems related to market and mechanism design, particularly for applications in decentralized finance, or DeFi. I'm here to talk about the benefits DeFi can bring to the financial system, why its promise could be strengthened by a well-designed market structure bill, and why a bill that doesn't take it into account could be harmful to innovation. Crypto provides an alternative to our traditional world of finance. What stablecoins do for money and payments, DeFi does for trading, lending, and other functions of the financial system. DeFi can reduce costs and improve accessibility by removing unnecessary frictions in the back-end infrastructure of Wall Street. Decentralized finance is in its infancy, but it has already had a tremendous effect on one small corner of the financial system, crypto itself. For many crypto natives, the natural place to trade is now on decentralized rather than centralized exchanges. Decentralized exchanges work very differently from centralized ones. One illustrative example is Uniswap, with over $1 billion in daily volume. The core of the Uniswap protocol is a set of smart contracts that allow any user to efficiently provide liquidity between any two assets. Anyone can use Uniswap to instantly trade with other users without ever giving up custody over their assets. These decentralized exchanges, much like stablecoins, run directly on blockchain rails. They are open, verifiable, and interoperable. This is a far cry from the opaque and fragmented back-end systems of today's Wall Street. With crypto, and especially with DeFi, we have a chance to radically upscale our markets to make them more efficient, more liquid, and more integrated across our economy. DeFi infrastructure could modernize the backbone of our financial system, reducing the fees paid by ordinary investors. Tokenized stocks could lower barriers to entry for investing in American companies. And prediction markets can be more broadly brought to bear across the economy, improving our ability to foresee unexpected outcomes and hedge risks accordingly. At the same time, markets do need rules. We at Paradigm believe it is important that crypto regulations be clear, fair, and equitable. We also think it has been an unforced error for the US to be one of the last major developed countries to enact legislation on crypto market structure. In the hopes of providing some hard-won wisdom from our experience in crypto, we released 17 principles for market structure legislation. I wanted to flag 3 of the most important. First, crypto assets should be commodities. Crypto assets are designed to be used, to interact with smart contracts, and in some cases, to pay for on-chain operations, not merely for investment. A token classification rubric based on the Lummis-Gillibrand ancillary assets approach would be the best way to reflect this principle. Next, any decentralized crypto asset exchange should not be required to register with the CFTC, SEC, or any other regulator. At base, a true DeFi protocol is software. Just as we do not ask Microsoft to register Excel with the SEC just because companies use it to track their IPOs, we should not demand the engineers of DeFi protocols register their software just because others use it to trade. Finally, DeFi should be protected and supported across the globe. No government should be allowed to impose global restrictions on the trading of crypto assets through DeFi. In this way, the US would be resurrecting the work done by our forefathers to protect the freedom of the seas in prior centuries, and more recently, freedom of the internet. Let me close by stressing the tremendous potential opportunity that lies before you on market structure legislation. Every day, we at Paradigm see new ways that crypto will support economic growth in free markets, from prediction markets and DeFi to tokenized stocks, and even the use of Bitcoin mining to support the electric power grid. We are now even seeing crypto markets emerge for the trading of credits in AI compute. By enacting market structure legislation that is supportive of crypto, supportive of entrepreneurs, supportive of investors, and supportive of consumers, you can blaze the trail to those new markets for all Americans. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Now we'll turn to Mr. Garlinghouse. You are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chair Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Brad Garlinghouse. I'm the CEO of Ripple. Ripple has approximately 900 employees across our 15 offices worldwide. We were founded more than a decade ago with a mission to enable the Internet of Value, a world where money moves like information does today. We build software products that power cross-border payments, stablecoins, and digital custody. Ripple helps financial institutions reduce friction, unlock efficiencies, and serve their customers better. These are not abstract concepts. We work every day with banks that rely on our technology to deliver real results in the global economy. Ripple leverages the XRP ledger, a decentralized, battle-tested, open-source blockchain, as well as its native digital asset, XRP, to facilitate payments. XRP is built to enable fast, low-cost, and highly scalable transactions. From the start, Ripple made the deliberate choice to work with policymakers and regulators, not around them. We have taken a compliance-first approach, operating with over 60 payment, service, crypto, and money transmitter licenses domestically and globally. With regard to the topic of this hearing, we believe smart legislation should be based on several core principles. Consumers need protection from fraud and scams. Markets need proper oversight. Bad actors need to be kept in check. And innovation must thrive. A constructive and workable framework for digital assets and stablecoins that achieves these goals will expand access to financial markets, create jobs, strengthen the economy, and put the US on the path to being a global blockchain and crypto leader. For the last decade, the legal and regulatory uncertainty surrounding crypto has prohibited meaningful progress in the US. At Ripple, we certainly saw firsthand how the lack of clear rules of the road can be weaponized to target good actors. In turn, the technology, jobs, and tax dollars that go with it are pushed offshore, reducing regulatory oversight and putting consumers at higher risk. This has severely harmed American businesses, investors, and of most concerned, consumers. Ripple was the tip of the spear for this regulation by enforcement campaign and was subject to an enforcement action in 2020. We were the first leading US company to be sued by the SEC. We and many others understood that a loss here would be a death knell for the industry. Fortunately, after 4 years of a hard-fought legal battle, we prevailed. The court ruled in our favor on everything that mattered, including finding that the token XRP is not, in and of itself, a security. Our victory cleared the path for other market participants to fight back. Despite these headwinds, Ripple still prioritizes education and engagement with policymakers and regulators globally. For companies to have the confidence to continue doing business in the United States, Congress should focus on passing principled and smart legislation with these critical goals in mind. First, set clear jurisdictional boundaries for our main financial regulators. Second, establish pathways for companies to build in the US without sacrificing investor or consumer protections. And third, ensure that the US can be a global leader in crypto by taking full advantage of the benefits and efficiencies brought by digital assets and blockchain technologies. The US possesses the world's deepest capital markets, the most advanced technical talent, and a spirit of innovation that has powered our nation since its founding. There is no reason we should not be the undisputed leader in digital assets and blockchain. Over 55 million Americans participate in the crypto economy today, equating to over a $3.3 trillion market cap. A smart regulatory framework for crypto market structure is essential to realize that future and is overdue. Speaking on behalf of the crypto industry, I urge you to prioritize the passage of market structure legislation for digital assets through this committee and the full Senate to provide the rules and regulations needed to ensure that the U.S. becomes the crypto capital of the world. Once market structure legislation for digital assets becomes law in the United States, this will catalyze a new era of U.S. competitiveness and unlock efficiencies in financial transactions, dramatically helping consumers and businesses alike. Ripple hopes to see this become a reality, and we look forward to working with you to help make this happen. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Up next is the Honorable Timothy Massad at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University.
This guy's awful. Gary's
Good morning, Chair
brother.
Scott, Ranking Member Warren, members of the committee and staff. Thank you for inviting me today. My name is Timothy Massad. I'm former chairman of the CFTC, former Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. The views I express are my own and don't represent the views of the Kennedy School of Government.
Keep your views to
You
yourself.
know, many of us are familiar with the movie Groundhog Day, in which Bill Murray is condemned to repeat the same day over and over, and he finally escapes the time loop, not through external means, but by changing his outlook on life. And I suggest that we're in a similar time loop when it comes to achieving clarity in the regulation of digital assets, and we need to change our outlook. There have been repeated congressional hearings calling for clarity and a series of legislative proposals, each claiming to provide clarity, but there's never been a consensus. And whether it's Lummis-Gillibrand, FIT 21, or the Clarity Act, they all have similar flaws. They rewrite securities laws to create a new category of digital assets that their proponents claim will forever solve the problem. But none will achieve the clarity or the sensible regulation that we need, and each would undermine existing regulation. We need a different approach, and it requires recognizing a few facts. First, this is a technology. It's not an asset class. It will be used in many ways, including in tokenizing securities. Second, whether something in digital form is a security, a commodity, or neither cannot be easily defined by a paragraph or two in a statute. It depends on what the token represents, whether there is an issuer, whether the transaction is one in which capital is being raised, and so forth. Third, the technology and use cases are evolving rapidly, so we should not lock in definitions that will prove obsolete soon. And fourth, a principal reason for the lack of clarity is our fragmented regulatory system. We have two market regulators, neither of whom has full jurisdiction over the spot market for digital assets that are not securities. The industry has taken advantage of this gap by arguing that most use cases are not securities and can therefore be issued and traded without regulation. That has led to a lack of investor protection. Now, the primary regulatory response to date, court cases that seek to interpret the Howey test, has also not been sufficient. It was a whack-a-mole strategy, even when the particulars of a case made sense. But the solution is not for Congress to become the regulator. Instead, all these factors argue for creating a process by which the SEC and CFTC work together to provide the clarity and the necessary regulation. And legislation should provide them with the proper authority, principles, and flexibility to do so. But legislation that writes detailed rules and creates a binary classification scheme is bound to fail. Former SEC Chair Jay Clayton, who was appointed by President Trump, and I proposed this approach 2 years ago. We said Congress should mandate that the SEC and CFTC work together through a self-regulatory organization or otherwise to develop joint rules that would apply to every intermediary that trades or handles Bitcoin or ETH. Now, that was the jurisdictional hook. It establishes jurisdiction over the market without, as we said, debating classification of each token or Congress pursuing tortured rewriting of existing definitions of securities and commodities. We also said that rewriting existing law might fail to bring clarity and inadvertently undermine decades of regulation and jurisprudence as they apply to traditional securities and commodities markets. Our existing securities and commodities markets are the foundation of the U.S. economy and the envy of the world. Their strength and integrity rests on a regulatory framework that has been gradually and thoughtfully developed over almost 100 years. And therefore, a key principle for market structure legislation must be do no harm to that regulatory framework. The latest market structure proposal, like its predecessors, instead revises the securities laws in various ways that will create more confusion than clarity. For example, it creates a broad exemption for activities described as decentralized finance, which will lead to migration of regulated activity into an unregulated sphere. Decentralized activities may warrant different regulations to achieve our regulatory goals, but not a free pass. It provides an exemption from securities laws for raising funds to build a mature blockchain system, but you don't actually need to build it. You only need to have an intent to do so. The exemption isn't needed and it will be misused. And finally, it will not even regulate all the crypto activity taking place on centralized platforms today. It will, however, provide many
You're about out of
opportunities
time, sir, so.
for smart lawyers to engage in regulatory arbitrage. I thank you for your time and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And finally, we have Mr. Richard Painter from the University of Michigan, University of Minnesota School of Law.
Thank you very much, Chairman Scott, and I thank Ranking Member Warren for inviting me to testify today. I urge this committee and the House and the Senate to very carefully look at this bill and consider whether this bill will soundly regulate the cryptocurrency markets, the market structure. We cannot repeat the mistakes of the past. 100 years ago, there were hearings in the House and Senate to regulate the banking industry. And Congressman Louis McFadden of Pennsylvania introduced a bill that eventually became the McFadden Act of 1927. They thought they had the perfect solution to bring banking into the modern age and have the United States be the premier center for banking in the world. The regulatory structure that was framed in 1927, the McFadden Act, was informed largely by lobbyists from the bank industry, and it lasted 3 years. The banks collapsed in 1930. Congress had not regulated the banking industry, even though it said it did. Fast forward to the 1990s, when I was writing in the field of securities regulation, and securities-based swaps and derivatives were coming on the scene. And the argument was made that a securities-based swap is not a security. A stock can be a security, but not a securities-based swap that is based on that stock. And it took years to figure out how to regulate securities-based swaps agreements. Under the Clinton administration, under the Bush administration, we had years of lax regulation, deregulation of the banking sector, laws passed by this Congress, and we saw what happened in 2008. We do not want to make that mistake again. I implore you to carefully look through this bill. Listen to the industry experts who are here today. Listen to Chairman Massad about his experience as a regulator. Consider carefully whether we should be drafting, passing through Congress, a very detailed bill that locks a lot of definitions in stone, or rather take up Chairman Massad's recommendation that we have the SEC and the CFTC, the regulators, work together to respond to evolving market conditions.
So he doesn't want
Consider
clear
whether it
rules.
would make
Keep it
sense
vague.
to define a stock as a security, but not the tokenization of that stock. Think through these issues. Please do not make the same mistake that this Congress has made so many times before.
He just
And
wants no
last,
rules.
I want to emphasize how
So that the
important it
SEC
is that
can keep
conflicts of
attacking.
interest of members of the Congress and the President of the United States not influence the regulation of cryptocurrency or any other industry. Under 18 United States Code 208, it is a criminal offense for a United States government official to participate in a government matter that affects their own financial interest. A Treasury Secretary who is regulating cryptocurrency or issuing meme coins and investing in a crypto business would commit a felony. But Congress has exempted itself from that statute. Congress exempted the President of the United States from that statute and the Vice President. That is wrong. We cannot have the people who are in charge of passing legislation and enforcing legislation, implementing legislation, have conflicts of interest with their official responsibilities. That includes every member of the House and Senate. You should be divesting from crypto if you're going to be regulating crypto. And the President of the United States as well. The integrity of our financial system depends upon this. We've watched this movie before. Congress passes laws to regulate the financial sector, and it ends in a disaster because it was not regulated. Please do not repeat that mistake. We don't want to watch this movie again, and we do not want to watch a movie that is a combination of West Wing or the House of Cards and The Big Short. Please, do your jobs, represent us, the American people, protect our financial system so we never see again what happened in 2008, 1929, so many times before. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. We'll now turn to our round of questions. We'll offer each member of the committee a generous 5 minutes. If you like, I'll start the questions off. Ms. Mersinger, digital assets and blockchain technology could democratize finance, giving every American, no matter the background, access to financial services at lower costs with greater speed than ever before. To achieve this revolutionary potential, there is widespread agreement from industry leaders to the president and bipartisan members of Congress that we must provide clear rules that foster innovation and protect investors. And listening to you and frankly, Mr. Levin as well, I think Mr. Levin said we need a fundamentally new model because we're talking about, frankly, a fundamentally new world. It's not new today, but it's new to those of us who are going to pass legislation. And you talked about the importance of the existing laws as we see them are inadequate and frankly not applicable to this new opportunity to be the crypto capital of the world. From your perspective, why is regulatory clarity so important, and what are the risks if we fail to provide certainty for innovators and everyday Americans?
Thank you for that question, Senator. Traditional bank regulations are not fit for purpose for digital assets and blockchain technology. Those regulations are meant for centralized intermediaries, and that's not what we're dealing with here. We need a regulatory structure that is fit for purpose. Otherwise, this patchwork of regulations and state laws and the industry trying to piece together what is their regulatory framework doesn't work. And it's going to push and continue to push innovators offshore. The most important thing we can do is create a framework that gives clarity. The status quo doesn't work. We need to be able to have responsible innovation here in the United States. We need a framework that provides customer protections. And we also need to make sure that whatever framework we put in place, that it ensures that U.S. American values are what this new framework, or what this new technology is based on.
Thank you very much. Mr. Levin, there's a common belief that money laundering is easy with crypto, but the truth is it's not. Blockchain technology creates a permanent traceable ledger that can help law enforcement catch those bad actors. I've said it before, so I'll say it again. It's far easier to track something that has a digital footprint than something that does not. However, some of my well-intentioned colleagues seem to think that crypto is tailor-made for money laundering, when in reality, it's a whole lot easier for criminals to hide their tracks with cash. What are the most common misconceptions regarding the role of digital assets in illicit finance? And what rules do digital asset market participants already comply with in this space? You talked about, I think it was a couple $100 million that had already been seized by working together. I think the more we illuminate how the industry is already working with law enforcement, the better we understand the digital footprint versus cash.
Thank you for the question, Senator. The way that we see this market is that the majority of activity inside cryptocurrencies and on blockchains is legitimate activity. There are trillions of dollars of payments that are made using stablecoins every year. A lot of that, the vast majority of that, is not illicit activity. The illicit activity that we estimate at Chainalysis is less than 1% of the overall activity that occurs on these blockchains, which is equivalent to what we see in traditional markets, and in fact, oftentimes less than what we see in traditional markets. And so criminals themselves and gangs and whoever else we're dealing with understand that it's not possible to launder vast sums of money in these networks, and that the majority of the activity is legitimate. We do see, though, that when it comes to threats, for example, with fentanyl or pig butchering or terrorist financing, the industry comes together with law enforcement to collaborate on solving these cases. And we at Chainalysis have powered thousands of investigations that have spanned international geographies, cross-national boundaries, to be able to actually capture criminal proceeds in these investigations. The centralized services that have been helpful with this are subject to the AML and BSA obligations and have been from FinCEN guidance in 2013, and so have a very deep experience in actually helping law enforcement in these instances. And it's through that public-private collaboration that we can actually, solve the problems of illicit finance.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cortez, Senator Cortez Basto.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for having this important hearing. Let me start with Mr. Massad. Talk a little bit about what should the goal of a market structure legislation be that we're looking at?
I think it needs to set up a process and some principles for achieving clarity and addressing this regulatory gap. The gap is that in our framework, we have no regulator of the spot market for anything that's not a security. So we need to fill that. And we need to bring some clarity to this question of when is the use of digital technology turn something into a security or a commodity. But that's much more complicated, if you will, than simply writing in, a single definition. And that's why I advocate a process. That's why Jay Clayton and I advocated more of a process of bringing the SEC and the CFTC together. You don't necessarily have to merge them, but we need to have them work together on this.
Thank you. And Ms. Mersinger, would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree that we need a framework that's going to work for the industry. We need clear lines of jurisdiction here. And I totally agree with the SEC and the CFTC working together. In fact, they could do that right now, and they are doing that right now, working together to provide what clarity they can. But we still need legislation to oversee the spot market, and as Mr. Massad said.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you this as well, and maybe Mr. Massad, let me start with you again. I have heard from my state's a security administrator and many of them across the country about the paramount importance of preserving states' powers in federal market structure legislation. Can you talk about why that is important?
Yes, I think it is important because the state securities authorities have always played a critical role in our system. And again, I think you're going to hear a lot of comments today suggesting this is this whole new world and so forth. It is a technology. And we got to remember what we have going on are still, most of this activity is going through centralized intermediaries. It's not just happening on chain. So I think we still need the resources of the states as well as the enforcement resources of the SEC and the CFTC to bring to bear.
Thank you. Mr. Levin, thank you. By the way, you did some great work with Caesar's Palace. I thank you for the work that you've done. I appreciate it. And for that reason, I understand we're all concerned about the scams and the fraud that could occur, that quite honestly always occurs with some sort of new technology or something happening at the federal level. Our goal here is to make sure we're protecting our consumers and giving the regulators and law enforcement the tools in the private sector to go after that and stop that. Can I ask you, what are the biggest obstacles to identifying and recovering ransom payments or stolen crypto funds?
Thank you for the question, Senator. The biggest barrier that we find when we're looking for money that is being stolen or has been extorted through ransom is that money can move to foreign jurisdictions where there can be non-compliant centralized entities that actually hold cryptocurrency on behalf of those illicit flows. And that's where it's really important for the United States to be able to work across different geographies to be able to prevent the laundering of that activity in foreign jurisdictions.
And would you say that state and local law enforcement and regulators already have the tools they need to address those the scams?
I would say, Senator, that we are still in the infancy of state and local agencies actually having the capabilities to be able to go after these types of crime. There are instances in certain jurisdictions where the state and local enforcement agencies actually do have capabilities at their disposal, but we have found that actually there's a technology barrier to entry. And so us at Chainalysis, we've been pioneering a lot more new technology powered by AI to actually help state and local agencies get a hold of easier insights to these types of crimes so that they can go after this activity.
What is it in the market structure regulation that we're looking at that we need to be cognizant about to ensure that law enforcement, whether it's federal, state, or local, has the tools they need?
I think it starts, Senator, with the actual regulators to actually have the tools in place to monitor the publicly available information and proactively go after the types of threats that we need, rather than overly relying on a reporting structure that we've had in traditional markets.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've listened with great interest today, and here's what I hear you saying. The four folks to my left, I hear you saying that digital assets are different. Digital assets hold great promise. Digital assets need special rules. I agree with that. The obvious question is, what should those rules be? And to what extent should we allow you to draft them? I've also heard some of you say that digital assets represent the next generation of the internet. Well, we let the current generation of the internet draft their own rules. And frankly, it looks like what we got as a result looks like somebody knocked over a urine sample. Congress can't even agree on basic legislation dealing with privacy on the internet. How the hell are we going to tackle this? But I hear what you're saying. I hear Mr. Painter, as usual, if you follow him on social media, you know, all politicians are crooks. Very helpful. I want to direct most of my questions to Professor Massad. Is that how you say your name?
Massad.
Mr. Massad. I'm really worried we're going to get this wrong. We don't know, we in Congress and our staffs don't know as much as the professionals in digital assets know. And I don't see how we can possibly catch up. Tell me more about your idea of having the SEC. Well, first, I don't want to run out of time here, but why is the digital assets industry so scared of being regulated by the SEC?
Well, I think we need to step back, Senator.
Briefly, please.
They don't want everything treated as a security because they don't want that entire framework to apply. But that's also because the SEC did fail to try to customize its rules
Sure.
to adapt for this technology, and it should do that. And you've got leadership at the agencies now who are working on those things.
You're suggesting that we turn to two of our agencies, one of which is the SEC, and say, you have expertise. Before we take a crack at a bill, you come up with a bill with rules, with regulations. Tell us how to do this. Because I hear you saying in some cases, digital assets are commodities. In some cases, they're securities.
Congress needs to fill the gap, which is if it's not a security, who's going to create a regulatory framework for it? So you do need to fill that. But these questions about exactly which is when is it a security, when is it not a security, how do we customize the rules, what should we do about DeFi? A lot of that should really be left to the agencies. You could establish some principles, but I wouldn't write detailed rules.
Have you looked, Professor, at Congressman Hill's legislation?
I have in detail.
What do you think?
I think it's got a lot of problems. I think it's 236 pages of regulatory arbitrage opportunities for creative lawyers. And I used to be one that did that kind of stuff.
Made a lot of money, did you?
I did, but
Yeah. Mr. Painter, do you think Senator Gillibrand is a crook?
No, and I do not think all politicians are crooks.
And why did you call her a crook?
I did not call her a crook. Now, Senator, you need to focus
here's what
on
I'm
this
looking
bill.
right now.
You're doing this again. You did it the last
published a
hearing.
tweet that
You
said
need to
Senator
read the
Gillibrand's
bill.
role in stablecoin regulation, $217,000 in crypto donations. You tweeted that.
Yes, I
And
do.
then you said, the crypto industry is buying Congress and the White House. This won't end well. Why do you think the crypto industry is buying Senator Gillibrand?
I said, look at the campaign contributions from this industry.
Do you think they've bought her?
No, I said, look at the campaign
You said they bought her.
contributions.
Do you think they bought her?
Senator, you need to focus on this bill instead of trying to distort my Twitter.
You
Last
called
time,
one of my
you were
colleagues a
quoting
crook,
what a Marxist in
and-
Chicago said
and
about
what
me.
evidence do you
Make
have
no
that she's a
sense.
crook?
I said there is massive amount of campaign contributions coming into this Congress from the crypto
Do
industry.
you want to apologize to
need-
Senator Gillibrand?
I do not want you to have to apologize for passing
Do
legislation
you want to
that
apologize
destroys
to
our
Senator
economy.
Gillibrand for calling her
You
a
are
crook?
distorting
crook.
what I said, just like you did in the last hearing. You're wasting everybody's time, Senator.
You're a whack job.
Senator,
You are
are
a
wasting.
majorly
Well, I think we are.
everyone's
next
time.
I
level
think we.
whack
You're-
job.
you-
I think we
Is
are.
this middle school, Senator?
Senators and witness. Thank you both.
I
for
think
your
you should
part-
apologize, Senator.
I think,
Gillibrand.
Senator, you're wasting our time. This is not middle school.
Thank you for your participation. I will say that Senator Smith is next. Floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, not so long ago, I think you could safely describe most individual investors in digital asset markets as enthusiasts, but that has changed a lot over the last few years as digital assets have become more mainstream. And I think the topic of this conversation today, looking at what sort of a regulatory framework we need for digital assets, is very important.
Jimmy.
And it's important that we don't provide just a stamp of legitimacy over this sector, but we are actually providing the kind of consumer protections that people need. Investors should be protected from fraud, from misleading information, from self-dealing, and from conflicts of interest by those that purport to be representing them. They should be protected from unfair and rigged markets. And those protections are going to be good for investors, but they're also going to be good for the market. So, Mr. Massad, I want to get at some of the what this proposed market structure legislation should look at. And we have kind of as our, the legislation that's out there, the Clarity Act. So I'm going to just try to get at some of the issues in the Clarity Act. So as I understand it, the Clarity Act would prevent any digital asset from being regulated if it is represented as a collectible, or as art, or as something that has inherent value or utility or significance beyond its mere existence as a digital asset. Do I have that right?
yes, you do.
Okay, so that seems like a pretty big loophole to me, and I want to just dive into this a little bit. So if a cryptocurrency, for example, was launched by a social media influencer, could that, in your view, be have some inherent value and
Certainly.
therefore be exempted. What about, let's say, a mem coin that might get you invited to
Yes.
dinner with the president? Would that
Yes.
have potential inherent value?
Yes.
Tesla is worth more than several of the world's largest automakers. If it were to issue a crypto stock token, would that have inherent value?
Well, that certainly would. That would be also exempted as a security. So
So
that should be still regulated as a security.
as a security, right, which
Right.
is sort of the underlying challenge, as you pointed out a moment ago. So I mean,
Here-
can you imagine a crypto asset that wouldn't have some inherent value?
Well, this is the problem. It's unclear exactly what would be categorized as digital commodities under this definition. A lot of people say it would be these native tokens like Bitcoin. I would think about it this way. Most trading today occurs through centralized intermediaries. It does not occur through these decentralized exchanges. Those centralized intermediaries list several hundred tokens. The question is, how many of those would be regulated by this? And I think it would only be a handful, and that's a real problem.
Well, exactly. Mike, this seems to me like a loophole that you could drive a truck through.
Yes.
And I don't think that that is an accident as
Correct.
this legislation has been developed. Let me touch on another issue. I think we've heard it today. Crypto industry and its promoters are sort of branding digital assets as something new, as innovative, as revolutionary, and therefore they need some sort of new or bespoke regulatory framework because the established rules for protecting investors and guaranteeing the freeness and fairness of markets don't apply. And I'm not arguing that there aren't some specific things that we need to address because of the nature of these assets. But here's an example of this. Under the Clarity Act, it would allow a crypto company to raise up to, I think it's $300 million from retail investors over 4 years, as long as they would be exempted from complying with SEC registration and disclosure rules, up to, even if they're raising up to $300 million in from retail investors. Is that, do I have
Yes,
that right?
there's a new exemption for capital raising for building what's called a mature blockchain system.
That's right.
It does require some disclosure, but it's otherwise an exemption from
From
securities,
SEC.
from
Okay.
registration.
So if a regular company was required, would be required to disclose to the SEC how they're spending the money that they raise.
Yes, I mean, the challenge, the problem with that exemption is you don't actually have to build the mature blockchain system. You just have to have the intent to do it.
You just have to have the intent to do it, but you could use that money for, I mean, what would stop you from using it to buy a house in, the Virgin
Well,
Islands?
conceivably, there could be a lawsuit against you for misleading information. But, if you had
That's
a
sort of like an
reasonable.
after the fact.
Yeah, that's after the fact.
Right, exactly. Well, so this is, and I know I'm out of time here. I just want to close by saying this is my concern, is that it's not really a new regulatory regime at all. It actually is sort of continuing the status quo that has landed us in some pretty significant
Well,
problems.
I think I think the problem with the act is it's undermining the existing
Correct.
regime. We do need to customize some rules.
Yes,
But this isn't a good way to do it.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, and thank you for doing this hearing. It's something Mr. Massad said, which I thought was fascinating, was that we've had times that we could have passed market structure regulation and Congress hasn't done it. There hasn't ever been a market structure regulation bill marked up by the Banking Committee. So I'm just not sure where that came from. That there was this idea that market structure regulation had been attempted before it's ever been attempted. But Mr. Massad, just for your sake, I just want to clarify a couple of things that you said to make sure you meant to say what you said. Did you call Bitcoin a native token?
Yeah, it's often referred to as a native. In other words, Bitcoin and ETH are referred to as native tokens of the blockchain.
So you're saying Ether and Bitcoin are the same?
Well, I'm classifying both of them as what you call native tokens of the blockchain.
So you're saying that a native token is how you would describe Bitcoin. I just want to be clear of that.
It's a term that's used to describe when you have a blockchain and you have the token that allows you to use that blockchain. That's often called a native token. Yes.
Got it. And therein lies exactly why we need to have this market structure regulation. Because the idea that we would turn over this industry to some bureaucrat working at some agency is insane, because that would make it so that no American company would ever invest in a digital asset company in the United States of America, when you had people who are just completely not lacking the fundamental technical base. This reminds me of the Facebook ad where the little old lady is sitting there taking pictures off a physical wall, and the guy saying, yeah, none of this works this way. Bitcoin is a commodity. Now, so there was a lot of talk about meme coins and NFTs. So let me ask you this follow-up
Mr.
question.
Chairman, if I, Senator, if I may just say,
I get to ask the
I was the guy
This
who
is the great-
declared
this is-
Bitcoin a
this is-
commodity.
This is the great part about being a senator. I get to ask you the questions.
Okay.
So were you prohibited by law to cooperating with the SEC?
No,
Why didn't you?
I did.
So no, but you just said that what we should do is have the CFTC and the SEC
Aberrate
work
them.
together.
Yes.
Why didn't
Mandate.
you do that?
Well, when I was there, I did that, sir.
So
What
then
I'm saying
so
is
you're saying that
Congress,
you solved
Congress
all
shouldn't try to be the
No,
regulator.
no, hold on a
sir.
second. You're saying you solved all these problems when you were at the CFTC with the SEC.
No,
So
but
then
we
why do we
solved the
need any-
swap problems.
Okay, so you didn't solve all the problems. So you want us to have the
There's-
SEC and the CFTC work together. But what you really want is you want Congress to abdicate its responsibilities
No,
to unelected
not at all.
bureaucrats,
Not
such
at
as
all.
yourself.
As with
So let me-
Jay Clayton, a
so let me-
Republican appointee, he agrees with me on this.
Are you a baseball fan? I assume you're a Red
yes.
Sox fan up there at Harvard?
No, I
No?
live in
No?
Washington, sir.
Oh, geez, so Pete. All right, so is a baseball card a security?
No.
What's the difference between a baseball card and a meme coin?
Sir,
No, just what's the difference? How would you explain it to me technically?
they're both, you could classify them both as collectibles.
Is it the government's rule to prevent me from paying $5 million for a 1952 Mickey Mantle?
I think people should be allowed to invest in whatever they want to invest in, sir.
So that does that mean meme coins as well?
If they want to buy and sell meme coins, that's fine. But
So
we
you don't
should
think
have
that
a
should-
regulatory framework for certain financial instruments.
no.
We've
I'm
learned
talking
over
about-
the
I'm talking
years
about
that
meme
that's
coins.
useful.
I'm talking about meme coins. Do you think that the government, the SEC or the CFTC should regulate meme coins?
I think we should have an investor protection framework over this, over financial instruments.
I'm gonna
If
take
we
that as
want to
a-
decide
you
that
saying
they're
yes?
not financial
Are
instruments,
you saying yes? It's just simple because we only have
Uh,
5. The chairman's very strict. Only lets us have 5
I
minutes.
understand that, Senator.
So
but
you're
I
saying
think
yes
you'd-
or no?
I think you
Simple.
might appreciate that it's a more complicated issue than that. At least I would hope you
should
do.
it's not complicated. Should the SEC or the CFTC regulate meme coins? It's
The
a
SEC
yes
has
or no.
already said it won't, and that's fine with me.
Okay.
But I'm happy to create a category that's neither a security or a commodity.
Should we include baseball cards in that as well?
No, I don't.
Give
think
this
we're
man
talking
another
about
5
baseball
minutes.
cards here, sir.
What's the difference?
Because we're talking about a particular technology of tokenization
No,
and
because
blockchain. That's the focus of this
here's what I
matter.
want
We're
my
not
col-
talking
here-
about anything that people. trade.
Here's what I want my colleagues to understand. How many business people work at the SEC and the CFTC? How many entrepreneurs? How many people who started companies work there?
I don't have that information, sir.
Let's say none. And then let me just finish this with Mr. Painter with just something that you said, which was also equally staggeringly insane. You said that Congress should not own crypto, correct?
So members of Congress should not be investing in the crypto industry.
They said that you
I-
shouldn't own crypto. You shouldn't own crypto.
You know,
That's not
It is
complicated.
very clear if you have your own meme coin. I don't know, Senator, whether you have your own meme coin.
Time out.
It said-
you shouldn't own crypto.
I said you shouldn't be investing in the crypto industry if you have your own crypto trading platform.
But shouldn't own baseball cards either.
I
Because
didn't
because
talk
Congress
about
regulates
baseball
professional
cards,
Congress
Senator.
regulates professional baseball.
No, I said
Am I allowed to have money in a bank account?
you should be allowed to do what executive branch officials should do, and it would be a criminal offense for an executive branch official under laws passed by this Congress to regulate the crypto industry while holding an interest in a crypto firm. That is just a law, and Congress passed that law and imposed it on everyone else
Moreno,
except for members
You
of
want
Congress.
to finish your thought on this?
Yeah, my point is,
He
for
doesn't
some
wanna
reason,
stop
I don't
him.
understand why. Maybe it's just a generational problem. It seems like the crypto industry, that people of a certain generation are just afraid of it. And that fear and lack of knowledge and having the humility to know that you just don't know the technological issues here has made this industry just reticent on understanding that there's a whole new world. And by the way, the 1946 securities laws should not be dictating what we're doing today. And I think I hope that my
Senator.
colleagues understand it. This is a generational issue. It's not a Democrat versus Republican issue. And if you took the time to just understand the technology, I think it would be easier for us to move forward.
Senator Warnock, you
Put
have
your
6 minutes.
baseball bat down. Damn.
I was going to ask you, Brother Chairman.
Brother Senator, I knew you were going to ask me the question. You're also a pastor. So you get free
Thank
closing,
you so much. I may not need it.
Thank you.
As this committee begins
Senator,
work
get the
on,
rest of the time.
as this committee begins work on bipartisan legislation to provide certainty and clarity to the crypto market, it's critical that any bill we advance provides strong consumer protections. And this is why I'm incredibly concerned about the rise in so-called meme coins. In February, the SEC published a staff statement on meme coins, warning that they expose amateur investors to, quote, rug pull and pump and dump schemes. Mr. Masid, what do you think the effect of this staff memo will be on investors in meme coins? And do you think the SEC will bring civil actions or enforcement against any of these scammers?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. I think the SEC has said that these are not securities, and I would agree with that. The issue then becomes if they're being listed on platforms such as centralized exchanges where people are trading Bitcoin, what should we do about that? People say we want to regulate those platforms insofar as they trade Bitcoin. We should either say they can't trade other things that aren't regulated, or whatever they trade has to be subject to the same regulations. I think in terms of immediate effects, you have these things being traded, and people can misunderstand them, can get defrauded. I don't expect the SEC or anybody else to take actions about that unless it was really a very, very serious case of fraud, and that would be up to the Justice Department.
So, these issues, I think it's important that we recognize that these aren't theoretical arguments. They impact real people and their actual lives. And analysis of coins issued on pump.fun, a popular meme coin generating site, indicated 60% of users on the platform lost money, with 1,700 wallets suffering losses that exceeded $100,000. What do you need, Mr. Masid? What do
People
we
lose
need
money
to
in the
see
stock
Senate
market all the
bill
time.
to protect consumers from meme coin scams without sacrificing innovation in the market? I think we don't have to embrace the false choice between innovation and giving consumers reasonable protection. What would you like to see in the Senate bill?
Well, what I'd like to see is consistency between what we allow these centralized exchanges that are trading Bitcoin to trade and what's subject to the bill. In other words, if we're going to regulate those centralized exchanges, when we should do that, and they shouldn't be allowed to list things that aren't then subject to all those same regulations. And right now, the bill is very inconsistent in that respect because it excludes those meme coins from digital commodities, but it doesn't prohibit the listing of those meme coins on these very same exchanges.
So I look forward to working with my Republican colleagues as we think about these issues. This year alone, President Trump and his family have launched a meme coin, a stable coin, and a governance token. The Trump family has also indicated that they may offer a crypto wallet as well as other crypto products. They're quite active in this space. Mr. Painter, how does President Trump's promotion of cryptocurrency, including his meme coin and his family's company, intersect with his official duties and his administration's policies?
If Donald Trump were the Treasury Secretary and regulating crypto and had those interests, he would be guilty of a felony under 18 United States Code 208, the statute I referenced before, which Congress has passed and imposed on every employee of the United States government except for the members of Congress, the president, the vice president. And this is just unacceptable to have a president who is in charge of the regulatory apparatus for any industry, including crypto, while he has such a vast interest in crypto, including a meme coin that I understand has lost somewhere around 70% of its value since Inauguration Day, I believe. I don't know who lost money on that, but I think I know who made money.
Yeah. Quickly, yes or no? So do you believe that the president having an outsized role in so many digital asset offerings will lead to fair and innovative markets? I think
No, it will lead to a lack of confidence in our regulatory system. Just as like this Congress, everyone's receiving campaign contributions from the crypto industry voting on this bill. And then if a witness comes here and disagrees with you, you call them a whack job. I mean, this is embarrassing. What's going on in this town?
I
Shut up,
agree
Black
that
Job.
President Trump's crypto corruption distorts the digital asset marketplace. And writing a bill with a corruption caveat for the president sends a clear message that Congress is not serious about addressing corruption, which we know undermines investors' faith in capital markets. His corruption creates an unfair market that stifles innovation because his investors justifiably do not want to compete against the president of the United States. Ironically, for those who want to see us do something on market structure, it seems to me that that's not a fair market or a free market. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Oh, man.
You
All
see, he
right.
said amen to the preacher.
I have so many comments for you, Senator. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Lest you run over your time by 60 seconds, we will move on to Senator Haggerty's next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate the leadership that you've demonstrated in this important area. And I also want to commend you and thank my colleagues here on the committee for your actions to support our recent Genius legislation.
Yes, sir.
That provides much needed regulatory certainty in the area of payment stablecoins that I think we desperately needed. And I've also been amazed and very pleased in the wake of that to see the energy and the enthusiasm behind market structure legislation. And I'm very pleased to see this esteemed group of folks here today that are ready to testify to help us with that. For too long, the lack of intelligible definitions, jurisdiction, and pathways to registration from our regulators have forced digital asset innovation beyond our borders. One of the saddest things that I heard as I came into the Senate, talking to members of the industry, with the brilliant people, were taking up new jobs and new positions in countries other than our own because they felt they couldn't survive here. Why is that? Because in the void of regulatory framework, the SEC and others had stepped into that void and done one of the most pernicious things that we ever see here in Washington, the so-called enforcement by regulation, or regulation by enforcement, I'm sorry. That creates massive uncertainty. That has lent itself to destroying the possibility of America leading in this incredibly innovative sector. And I'm so pleased to see us moving back in a new direction. So, Mr. Robinson, I'd like to start with you if I could. In your testimony, you discussed the importance of limiting developer liability so that developers can freely build applications here in the United States. And to be clear for my colleagues, without this sort of limitation, developers could be held legally liable for the actions of third parties with whom they have no relationship. So, Mr. Robinson, would you talk with us about how you perceive the Senate's role in establishing market structure regulation that would effectively address this policy issue?
Thank you, Senator Haggerty. This is an issue that's very important to me as a software developer myself. And I care about this a lot, and a lot of my fellow engineers in the industry have been very concerned about the potential for regulatory actions going after software developers just for publishing code. We think it is very important that the Senate include a protection shielding developers from liability. And in fact, the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, which was adopted in the House as part of the Clarity Act, does address exactly that. And I would encourage the Senate to include similar language in the bill that they pass.
I appreciate that. Ms. Mersinger, I'd like to turn to you. And here I'd like to talk about the jurisdiction with the CFTC and the SEC, an area that you know a great deal about. And we're trying to delineate and establish the appropriate regulatory authorities between the two agencies, the CFTC and the SEC. And I'd just like for you to explain to my colleagues and for this audience today why it's so important that we ensure jurisdictional harmony between these organizations.
Thank you for that question. To your point about regulation to enforcement, when the only regulatory actions that are occurring are lawsuits and legal settlements, there's no clarity, and you have a situation where those who want to follow the law and do the right thing, one, are worried to innovate here in the United States, but they also are not sure where to go to follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to have clarity around who's what is the right regulator and who is overseeing these markets. And from my experience in the CFTC, one of the things I'll point out is the CFTC has broad anti-manipulation and anti-fraud enforcement authority over commodity spot markets, but they do not have regulatory jurisdiction over those same markets. So the CFTC could only come in after fraud or manipulation had occurred. There was no regulatory oversight. So providing that regulatory framework so that you have a regulator overseeing these activities will help prevent, regulation through enforcement, because you will have the examiners, you will have the regulators looking at these businesses and ensuring that they're following the laws and the regulations, rather than having to come in after something bad has happened and bring enforcement cases.
Got it. Thank you. Mr. Garlinghouse, I'm going to turn to you with a related question. We're trying to calibrate an appropriate regulatory framework here for the digital assets arena. One of the concerns I have is, rather than engaging with technologists, with people in the industry who are actually at the cutting edge of innovation, lawmakers, regulators could actually try to force the digital assets markets into outdated regulatory frameworks. I think that would stifle innovation, that would put us at a great disadvantage. And as we think about it, there are certain factors that are unique to the digital assets ecosystem. And what factors would you emphasize that we focus on as we think about an appropriate regulatory framework moving forward?
Thank you, Senator. I think there are unique aspects that need to be thoughtful and applied potentially uniquely to any legislation around this. That said, I do think that where Mr. Massad and I disagree is that depending upon an SEC and CFTC to work together assumes good faith appointed officials in doing that. What we have seen previously is the SEC actually sowed confusion in the marketplace. They took contradictory positions. Under Chairman Gensler, they took actually contradictory positions in different court cases, which actually created more confusion. And so you had federal judges saying things like the SEC was being arbitrary and capricious in their application of the law. You had judges, federal judges, saying that they were not following a, quote, faithful allegiance to the law. And so my concern in depending upon a unelected appointee to make those decisions is that it assumes a good faith actor. And I think what we saw in this most recent SEC was just a war against the industry at large without a consistent application of that law.
Well, I think we need to put in place a sufficient framework so that we don't have to rely on the goodwill of a particular regulator, but that it's clear to them our intentions. So thank you all. Appreciate the entire panel being here today. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Haggerty. On behalf of the chairman, I now recognize myself. We need to make sure that any new legislation to regulate crypto market doesn't do more harm than good. And there are a couple of areas where I think we need to be very careful not to make things worse. First, we cannot pass any legislation that eats away at the SEC's current jurisdiction to regulate traditional securities. Now, Mr. Massad, you were chair of the CFTC and you were Assistant Secretary for Treasury for Financial Stability. Could market structure legislation make it possible to structure a non-crypto product so that it dodges our security laws? Use something like Tesla stock as an example.
Yes, it certainly could. If you, for example, provide an exemption for activity on decentralized trading protocols, and that's a very broad exemption, then you could tokenize Tesla stock and have it traded on that protocol, and it could be exempt then from 34 Act trading requirements at least.
So in effect, we start to repeal the SEC as we've had it for traditional.
It could
stock.
certainly undermine their authority substantially.
It's critical that any crypto regulation bill we pass does not have massive unintended consequences. And I think those are unintended consequences for everyone, but consequences that would reach far beyond the crypto market and take a tire iron to the $120 trillion golden egg that is America's capital markets. So I think it's an important note we have to do in regulation here. There's another problem that we've got to face, and that's corruption. President Trump has made it impossible to have a conversation about crypto legislation that does not address his most successful grift. According to a recent New York Times analysis of the president's financial disclosure, crypto is now the biggest source of President Trump's wealth. In the past 7 months, he has become the most successful president in history at making money off his time in the Oval Office, and he's done it using crypto. Now, Mr. Painter, if Congress passes a bill creating a new federal regulatory framework for the crypto market, what will happen to the crypto market? Is it likely to grow?
It will grow substantially.
Okay, and what will that do to the value of President Trump's meme coin?
It will make him very rich, even richer than he already is.
And what about the value of
That's
his
an assumption.
stablecoin
There's no
and his
guarantee
son's
that his
Bitcoin mining operation and
specifically
his
will grow.
family's crypto holdings? And
The
on and
same,
on.
the Trump family will become very, very wealthy as the prices go up and the bubble rises.
So if we create a new federal regulatory framework for the crypto market, the president and his family stand to make a whole lot more money. So, Mr. Painter, if the president and his family own billions of dollars in crypto, if Congress passes a crypto bill, who will claim the power to appoint and the power to fire the regulators that will implement whatever new rules are put in place governing crypto holdings?
The president of the United States, and he is now also claiming the power to fire the members of independent commissions, and that will include the Commodities Futures Trading Commission and the SEC.
Okay, so you were President Bush's chief ethics counsel. Can you think of another time in American history when a president of the United States held such power over regulators, the very regulators who would determine the value of the president's own net worth?
Never. We have never had, since the Civil War, a president of the United States with substantial financial holdings that are conflicted with any official duties. This is unheard of. And now it's not just real estate, but Donald Trump recently is into crypto, even though he said that it was a scam just a few years ago. He's now into crypto and into social media industries he did not have in his first administration.
We need clear and strong rules for the crypto market, but the proposals I've seen so far undercut the investor protections in our traditional capital markets. They harm our national security, and they supercharge the value of President Trump's crypto grift. We need crypto regulations that actually regulate the industry. We don't need another giveaway to a handful of billionaire insiders. And with that, I conclude and not only call on Senator Britt, but hand the gavel to you.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member. I appreciate the chairman for holding this hearing today and being serious about creating a framework for digital assets in the United States, and certainly appreciate all of you and your willingness to be here with us and testify on this important topic. Obviously, it's a very complicated issue, a lot of moving parts. We've seen some fireworks today. One of the primary points is just around definitions. How do we properly define digital commodity versus digital security? And what does that actually mean for the role of our regulators? We know digital asset securities can share many characteristics with traditional securities, but they're not inherently the same, and regulation needs to reflect that. Much like applying, traditional regulatory framework to a new decentralized finance system, it just doesn't work. I'm concerned about the compliance burdens for developers and for startups and how we actually strike the right balance between the two. I've seen firsthand what happens to our small businesses and our small financial institutions when you have overregulation, and it becomes unsustainable. So my first question is actually for Ms. Mersinger. We are dealing with a rapidly evolving industry here, and we can't predict every change, right? So how do we create a framework that puts up the proper guardrails and the clarity that we actually need today without locking in rules that quickly become outdated? I'd love your thoughts on that and kind of your thoughts on how we approach that.
Thank you for that question. And I will say, as a former commissioner at CFTC, I believe this is a reason why there is so much interest in having the CFTC as a regulator over the digital spot market. It's because they have a principles-based regulatory regime, which provides that flexibility. So as technology changes, those companies, those startups, those small businesses can still operate and fulfill their regulatory duties, but not be subject to a prescriptive regulatory framework that locks into place the technology and the systems or the processes they're using when it's put in place. So I think the most important thing you can do is have principles-based regulatory regime and prevent having prescriptive regulations around this industry.
Are there kind of permanent and durable mechanisms that would actually encourage innovation? I guess my question, has the regulatory sandbox been beneficial in this regard, and kind of sort of how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been talk about sandboxes being a helpful tool.
Okay.
Both the SEC and the CFTC have exemptive authority that they can use. There's the ability to use staff no action letters and relief. So there are
Would you recommend that?
Yeah, there are a lot of tools in place that they can use to still oversee and regulate the space, but not stifle the innovation that is occurring and developing.
I'm going to shift gears real quick in my remaining time. Mr. Levin, I've heard the narrative that digital asset transactions are completely anonymous and beyond the reach of law enforcement. I disagree with this. As with any financial instrument or new technology, there's always going to be bad actors. And we should, of course, where any loophole exists, we should find it and close it and not enable illicit activity. But from my understanding, blockchain technology actually can offer an enhanced level of security, perhaps even more resistant to manipulation. And transactions on the blockchain offer a unique ability for tracing and tracking, including analyzing trends on the ledger. So, Mr. Levin, can you speak to this, both to the narrative that digital assets are untraceable and to what type of tools are available to identify and to actually combat bad actors?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. This is exactly the business that we at Chainalysis have been building for the last 10 years. We build tools and technology that actually allows law enforcement, regulators, businesses to actually track and trace cryptocurrency with the relevant context about where to get additional information if there is some sort of investigation or some sort of disruption action that needs to happen. I would say that there are two levels of tooling that is worthwhile the committee understanding, which is one is there are actual forensic tools that are being used in investigations where you are looking at very specific transactions of interest that have been flagged either through regulatory reporting or investigations. And then also the blockchain actually allows for a much more macro view of trends and threats that are persisting against society. And so you could actually investigate ransomware as a whole threat to the United States of America and look at the entire supply chain that causes ransomware to have impact on our communities and find where there is an opportunity for actual disruption of that supply chain for the threat.
Thank you so much. And I am out of time, but would love to continue this conversation with you, in particular, how we empower our state and local law enforcement with the tools they need so that they're better equipped in this regard. So thank you so much. And with that, I will recognize Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Senator Britt, and thank all of you for your testimony here today. Mr. Mossad, it's great to see you again.
Senator.
This time in front of the full committee. And Senator Britt's question is a good place to pick up because in Baltimore City, a number of years ago, you may remember, we experienced a ransomware attack. It was one of the earlier ones that became well known, and the attackers wanted to be paid in crypto. And what we've seen with respect to ransomware attacks is that they do, for the most part, use crypto as their currency of choice. And we've also seen that with respect to entities that engage in sanctions evasion. So I think there's a need to be very clear that decentralized finance is fully covered by our anti-money laundering and know your customer regulatory regimes. As we heard, there has been improvement in blockchain technology, and blockchain technology does have some of these important features that could make it easier to track transactions. But the fact also is that about $2 billion was lost in crypto security incidents in the first quarter of 2025 alone, nearly the entirety of what was lost in all of 2024. We have crypto mixers, cross-chain bridges, and other methods to obscure the movement of cryptocurrency. So it's not enough simply to state that we're going to ensure that crypto is subject to BSA and other regulations. We need effective supervision and enforcement. Can you talk briefly about what challenges you see today to getting from where we are to that kind of enforcement that would be necessary to oversee them on parity with the current laws?
Certainly, Senator. First of all, I would suggest we think about what takes place on chain and what takes place off chain. Mr. Levin, I have great respect for the work of Chainalysis. They're focusing on activity on chain, and they do a good job, but we have to remember they're only able to identify illicit actors where there's a known identifiable address. And, you know, there could be a lot of other activity happening. So I think we need better monitoring by issuers of digital assets, such as stablecoin issuers, need to be monitoring the chain, need to be applying risk analysis techniques and so forth. With respect to off-chain activity, though, that's where a lot of illicit activity takes place. It takes place through centralized intermediaries. And what Chainalysis does doesn't really reach that. And that's why we need an entire regulatory framework around these entities. We need to prevent wash trading. We need to make sure they're doing a good job on beneficial ownership. And finally, I think we need to give the Treasury Department more tools to enforce sanctions, to enforce money laundering. And there were a number of proposals made about 2 years ago that would enhance its authorities because digital assets are bearer instruments and they can be transferred, you know, on blockchains. And so I think the Treasury Department needs greater authority to impose sanctions and other measures on offshore entities that might be harboring this activity. And there's a variety of other things I'd be happy to discuss with you.
I appreciate that. I want to turn to you, Mr. Painter, and you indicate in your testimony and your writings that the avoidance of even the appearance of a conflict of interest, the appearance of corruption, is critical to ensuring public integrity of the crypto markets. And I agree with that statement. Would you agree that when Eric Trump visited the UAE shortly in advance of President Trump's visit there and helped broker a transaction where the UAE state-owned firm MGX executed a $2 billion transaction in the Trump family stablecoin, that creates the appearance, at least, of a conflict of interest?
It's terrible, and it may be a lot more than the appearance of conflict of interest.
And the president, of course, followed up a visit of his own there and made a deal with a separate UAE state-owned company that allowed the transfer of very sensitive US chips and AI technology to that other company called G42. It turns out that the chair of G42, the company that received the sort of crown jewels of US AI technology, and the chair of the company MGX that Eric Trump did the deal with, is the same person. Would you agree that that also creates the stench of corruption?
It certainly does.
I think it's pretty straightforward as well for anybody looking at the facts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses. I really welcome this hearing and the opportunity for a serious, sustained engagement in digital asset market structure. This is enormously complex and could fundamentally reshape the bones of our economy. We've already seen what happens when digital finance grows without guardrails, the collapse of FTX, Terra Luna, and Celsius wiped out billions in consumer savings and exposed glaring regulatory gaps. When regulation lags innovation, real people get hurt. At a time of rising prices and growing wealth inequality, I'm sure that we can all agree that the last thing we need is to rush or have a poorly designed market structure bill. And at the same time, I strongly believe in innovation. That's why I joined Senators Marino and he to introduce the bipartisan Deploying American Blockchains Act. And I support a bipartisan, thoughtful, transparent, and inclusive process, especially for legislation that could shape the future of US capital markets. My first question is for you, Mr. Painter. What are the risks if Congress moves forward too quickly in legislating without broad input and clear understanding of market consequences? And how do we ensure that this process produces a bipartisan framework that can stand the test of time?
The risk is that we repeat the experience of regulating the banks in the 1920s and the depression that followed, 10 years of depression. The risk is that we repeat what happened in 2008 when campaign contributions poured into Congress from the securities-based swap industry, elsewhere in the financial services industry, and we had decades of deregulation. The economy collapsed. Millions of American families losing their homes, people unemployed. We've been through this again and again. And this Congress needs to get it right this time and carefully read this bill and listen to witnesses, including the witnesses who might not disagree. And instead of the personal attacks that I've experienced today, some dignity from this Senate, care in drafting this bill.
I think
and
he's going to
thinking
cry.
about the American people you represent. We do not want another
crying.
economic collapse caused by deregulation of the financial services sector. And I want to ask you all, do you understand the bill? Have you listened to all sides? And are you willing to allow the regulators to use their expertise to watch what's going on in this sector, as Chairman Massad has suggested?
The last time we trusted
Please,
regulators
we don't want to go through those
to use their
experiences again.
expertise, we
Thank
had
you, Mr.
Gary
Painter. You show why this is so vital
Can't be
that
trusted.
we get this right, because it will touch all of us. Mr. Massad, some proposals would let crypto companies decide for themselves which rules apply and which regulator they'd answer to. And that sounds a lot like the businesses picking their own cop on the beat, so to speak. How should Congress design a system that applies the rules fairly and earns the public's trust?
Well, I think Congress should think in terms of principles, not trying to write detailed rules, because I think those can quickly become obsolete. I think number two, Congress does need to fill the gap in regulation that we've talked about with respect to the use of this technology for things that aren't securities. But, you know, to your point about the problems here, I mean, the problem with a lot of the proposals is that they try to write detailed rules that I don't think are going to provide the clarity, and I think will provide a lot of opportunities for simply evasion of their intent. I respect the goals. The goal is clarity. We all want that. But I think you've got to be very careful about how you achieve that.
Some people talk about regulatory standards for centralized systems, that they're inappropriate for crypto because it's inherently decentralized. But many of these protocols are run by centralized teams that control governance, the incentives, and even the code. So how should Congress decide when a so-called decentralized protocol acts more like a centralized financial intermediary and regulate it as such?
I think the principle Congress should have is, just because it's decentralized doesn't mean it's free of regulation. Regulation may be different, but for example, if we had a decentralized protocol that became the primary market for trading Treasury securities, we would not say, oh, because it's a decentralized protocol, we don't need to worry about regulation. So I think we may need different rules, but we still need rules.
Thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Mr. Levin, I'd like to just start with you. You know, I had gone through the Chainalysis 2025 Crypto Crime Report. First of all, thank you for that type of detail. But I wanted to ask you if you could elaborate on the role of mixers, other types of smart contracts, other types of anonymization tools in terms of facilitating illicit finance, illicit trading?
Thank you, Senator, and appreciate you taking the time to read the report. We at Chainalysis track the different types of anonymizing techniques used by illicit actors to thwart law enforcement actually being able to get after them. And actually, we have seen that mixers are used by illicit actors to cover their tracks in terms of laundering proceeds of crime. But there is also another side of this, which is it's possible to continue to trace through certain types of mixers in certain instances. And we've seen law enforcement be successful in those regards. I would say that it is important, as the committee thinks about regulating this space, to look at what are the residual risks that are there, given all of the tools in the disposal of law enforcement and all of the authorities that intelligence and law enforcement has in this domain.
I just want to make sure that I'm building this out right. So, for instance, you talked about in your hearing, in your testimony, that public ledgers underpin most digital asset activity, allows for visibility, certain amount of transparency. But, am I right that these anonymization tools are ones that obfuscate, that make it more difficult to be able to track?
Yes, Senator, it is correct that the majority of activity on these ledgers is transparent, and you can see which entities are involved. And Chainalysis provides the unique intelligence about whether it is a mixer that is transacting or whether that is a centralized exchange. And so it is possible to identify that activity. It is also possible in certain instances to actually be able to trace through those mixers and continue the hunt for a law enforcement agent.
I understand that in terms of the analysis to be able to track, but it does do a lot of that after the fact, after the transactions have already occurred, which makes it very difficult to be able to try to actually intervene, to be able to prevent these transactions from occurring. But I don't discount the fact that it's certainly helpful, especially when it comes to writing SAR reports, other things afterwards. Who are some of the actors that we're talking about here? I mean, we're talking about countries like North Korea and Iran, is that right?
Yes, Senator, really any illicit actor that is using cryptocurrency can use any type of service. And we've seen DPRK and we've seen Iran use mixers.
We also see different terrorist groups, is that correct?
In general, we have seen that terrorist organizations actually use very convenient technologies to be able to fundraise or pay people. And so we have seen less use of mixers in the context of terrorist financing actually than you would expect.
So terrorist groups still utilizing crypto in different ways, as well as cartels and other organizations like that. Is that right?
Senator, the illicit actors globally use the same technologies, the same services that all of us who use cryptocurrencies use, which is any type of instrument in cryptocurrencies.
Mr. Garlinghouse, I'd like to just kind of turn to you. I mean, I just wanted to just get your thoughts on this. I mean, do you acknowledge what Mr. Levin's saying in terms of the illicit actors, the bad actors being able to utilize crypto right now? And, I certainly appreciate the efforts that your company has made in terms of AML, but, we're still seeing these problems. Is that something that you see and recognize as well?
Ripple has always been a compliance-first company, and as I said in my early testimony, we have over 60 licenses around the world. That being said, I think anytime you see bad actors, they're looking for, as Mr. Levin said, whatever the easiest path is. They use cash, they use other assets. I've even read about them using gold. So certainly they're also experimenting and trying to use digital assets. I think the good news has been, in many cases, they don't often understand how traceable and trackable that actually is. And it's more trackable than obviously cash.
Yeah, but we're still seeing the anonymization tools being utilized. And again, a lot of that is after the fact. The difficulty, I mean, we saw North Korea right in front of the world be able to hack and take billions of dollars. We can see them moving around, but we had difficulty to be able to actually intervene. I don't discount the fact that we're never going to be able to stop it all. We can't stop it with cash. I think the problem that I see is that I used to work on counter-terrorist financing, and the sheer scale of this is enormous. It's an industrialization of North Korea's ability. They don't need to counterfeit anymore. They're finding ways to be able to do this. So I just hope that we can work together with industry, because I believe that industry doesn't want to have crypto be able to utilized in this way. I worry about the trajectory, what it might do to evade sanctions and other types of efforts. And this is something that I hope that we can address, especially when we're talking about over $50 billion just last year being used for illicit actors in this space. So I hope that this is something we can build off from. We had some efforts in this in a bipartisan way in the Genius Act, and I hope that we can make this a priority to make sure that we're trying to stop the terrorist groups, the cartels that we have talked about standing up against in so many different ways. And with that, I'll yield back.
Senator Lummis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing and for indulging us in finally addressing the topic of digital assets. When I arrived here 4.5 years ago, there was very little knowledge about digital assets. And to the extent that there was fear because it is something about which people knew very little, and in some cases still know very little. Yet the industry has innovated and grown and become a force in our economy, and in fact, in the global economy. We now see one digital asset company not only make an appearance on the S&P 500, but come into the S&P 500 in about the 135th position. That's how big this company is. We see several companies going public this year that are based in the digital asset industry. Yet we've seen foreign countries get ahead of the United States in terms of establishing a clear regulatory framework for digital assets. We have allowed regulatory agencies that are unfriendly toward this asset to use regulatory functions such as enforcement actions to bring about a regulatory morass for these industries when they've been unable to find out what regulatory framework they're supposed to follow, not having received clear guidance from the regulatory agencies to which they're subject and hope to comply. So we finally have an industry coming and requesting regulation so we know the rules of the road, so we can integrate this tremendous new technology into our economy. And so the time has come, and Mr. Chairman, I'm so pleased that you recognize the relevance, importance of the United States leading in this space. I also want to thank Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who joined me shortly after I arrived here in drafting legislation that has been out for 4 years, that people could look at, that people could comment on, that we could reform and change as the industry grew, and their ability to shape the regulatory framework that protects consumers, but that also works for the innovators. And that is the point at which we've arrived today. We are ready to take that step. So I want to thank my colleagues on the other side of the aisle for their diligence in working with our side of the aisle to bring legislation about, starting with the Genius Act that dealt with the stablecoin component of digital assets, and now moving into the commodities and securities portion of a market framework. I believe we're taking the right step and not a moment too soon. You know, government's always been afraid of innovation, and the innovators in our country have had to cross barriers in order to achieve what humans are capable of and have to fight government to surpass. You look at the internet, that the cypherpunks of the 80s and 90s were creating code and using cryptography, and the government was afraid of it. So the NSA called it a weapon, cryptography a weapon, and classified it as something that should not be available to the general public. But our courts in this country decided that cryptography and code writing is protected free speech under the First Amendment. And that was a game changer. It made it possible for those very brilliant minds to make available to each other through open source the cryptography and code writing that made it possible in 2009 for the first digital assets to appear on the scene. So now we're at the point where from 2009 and where we are today, we have a mature industry that is asking us to provide clear rules of the road. And as people responsible for the government and as members of the banking committee, we're in the right place at the right time to help these innovators take their rightful place in the global economy as an asset that is important to our country, that is important to individual freedom, that is important to the unbanked and underbanked, and that will make available to people the opportunity to grow assets that are capable of increasing in value, as opposed to our own US dollar, which is by design decreasing in value. Mr. Chairman, your leadership in this effort is deeply appreciated by me, and I look forward to working with you, Senator Gillibrand, and other people on both sides of the aisle to bring this legislation through the Senate to the House and to the President's desk. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Thank you for your leadership on such an important topic. And I will say, let me just get through some of my necessary comments, and then I'll close with a couple of comments about Senator Lummis and Gillibrand and others. For senators who wish to submit questions for the hearing record, those questions are due 1 week from today, Wednesday, July 16th. To our witnesses, you will have 45 days from that day to submit your responses to questions for the record. Thank you for your attendance to the panel today. Closing, I'd like to thank you for your time. I thought your testimony today was some of the best testimonies I've heard in my 10 years on the committee. They were clear, they were consistent, they were forward-looking, mostly, not all, mostly forward-looking. I truly appreciate that approach to it. I will say that Senator Lummis and Senator Gillibrand have worked on this topic for a number of years and are, frankly, thought leaders on both sides of the aisle. I think they're very important thought leaders. I hope we all remember and remember very clearly that our words are containers of power. We can weaponize them against Senator Gillibrand or President Trump if we want to. I think it marginalizes what you have to say. I think it reduces your actual contribution to this hearing. And I think it trivializes such a really important issue. And I think we should keep our focus on the main thing. And the main thing is safeguarding investors, protecting the marketplace, and protecting our nation's security. And that should be our objective. And that's what I heard mostly here today. And I hope that as we move forward on market structure, this is just a first step, guiding principles.
He's saying
We have
stop
not
bringing
put
Trump
forth
up.
legislation yet. But as we do so, we will do so not as red or blue, but those committed to red, white, and blue. And that is our objective, and we will achieve that objective. Thank you all for being here. Meeting adjourned.
It's basically telling the Democrats to stop making everything about Trump, stop talking about it, and get back to the topic, right? Anyway, guys, fantastic hearing. For the most part, I enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys did too. And I will see you guys tomorrow, 1 p.m. Central. Make sure you get over to the Patreon, guys, for all of the perks and benefits over there. And I will see you guys in the next one. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. I'll see you guys tomorrow. God bless.